everyone. I am so excited today to welcome Dane Wigington, one of my absolute heroes. And I have spoken so much about the fact that what good is it to ban the jabs when we do not ban geoengineering, because we are being poisoned and assaulted from every which way. And I am here today speaking with the absolute expert. And I'm very excited because, as you all know, I'm a certified chelation practitioner. I have been pulling heavy metals out of people for a long time. I see people sickened. I think that many of them are misdiagnosed. And I just want to talk about, the things that are being sprayed from the sky and that we're inhaling on a day-to-day basis. So welcome so much, Dane, and thank you so much for joining me today.
It's an absolute honor and a pleasure, Dr. Anna. Again, very, very grateful for all your work to try to bring to light what these elements are doing to the human body. And you're absolutely correct. We cannot hide from what's raining down through our air column. It's in every breath we take.
And, you've done a lot of research on actually what is in there, as well as spoken with whistleblowers. I had posted one of your videos where you spoke with a whistleblower that 40 million tons of this particulates are, and even graphene and other polymers and metals are being sprayed. Can you explain a bit about all of this and in regards to, what you've been seeing over the years and where are we at with this whole situation?
Well, it doesn't look good, and it's looking worse by the day. And the exchange you referred to was researchers we've worked with the University of Minnesota. That's an internationally renowned agricultural testing institution. And based on hundreds of lab tests over the state of Minnesota, and the extrapolation of the amount of material in that rain and extrapolating that over what a global coverage would be, it looks like something in the range, you were correct, 40 to 60 million tons of highly toxic nanoparticles dispersed annually. And that is likely a conservative estimate. So we're talking about aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, surfactants, polymer fibers, graphene, and likely much more that we don't know to look for yet. It's an ongoing experiment, and we are the subjects of that experiment. It's not only decimating the planet's life support systems, its climate systems, the protective ozone layer, but again, it's ubiquitously contaminating virtually everything. And I'll leave it with this, and as highly toxic as these elements are in and of themselves, for example, in the case of aluminum and mercury, and we all have mercury in us from multiple sources, as you know, coal-fired power plants puts it in the air. We have amalgam fillings and other sources, injections. Now we all have aluminum in us, and the combination of those two metals creates, as I know you know, and I'm sure most of your listeners already know, synergistic toxicity. And studies show in the case of aluminum and mercury, the combination can escalate overall toxicity as much as 10,000%. That's 100 times worse. So what about when we add all these other elements and then perhaps pathogens we don't know about? So that's why we're so focused on this, Dr. Anna, because it's not only completely derailing the weather systems, using weather as a weapon. This is clearly biological warfare.
Absolutely. And I just want to show a very quick image of what he's speaking of. So this right here is a heavy metals test that I pull out of one of my patients who eats organic, who lives out here. I'm in Washington State in a very rural area. And you can see in 1,500 milligrams of EDTA chelation, you get the amount of aluminum, the amount of barium here. And one of the things that I've been seeing over the last 3 or 4 years, actually uranium. And I believe that they're spraying this too, because before we were never seeing this. And, the issue is also that I've been looking at the food supply, for example, at the lifeblood of animals, from venison to, homegrown beef. And these polymers are in the animals. So we're eating this stuff and it's making us all sick. And I think that again, the threat to the entire ecosystem, because everything is being transformed. Our trees, our animals, it's absolutely ubiquitous. So what are you have spoken with even military generals. We know that this is part of even weather warfare. Owning the weather by 2025 was a document that the military has portrayed. What are our chances at all to start to, number one, bring awareness, and number two, what will be the effects before it's too late?
Those are all very important questions. I would argue the only way forward in this battle is to reach a critical mass of awareness in the population. And that doesn't mean just knowing, because as you know, many people can be aware of a truth, but they seem to feel no sense of responsibility to respond accordingly. So when I speak of a critical mass of awareness, that means an understanding that we are all literally quite immediately fighting for our lives. We are on a very short time horizon on the current course. To back up to what's showing up in those tests, including the radioactive elements, it appears that the toxic waste element of coal fly ash is a base material for these operations. And that would make perfect sense because there's many elements that are named in climate engineering patents anyway. It eliminates a waste product and it provides plausible deniability. They can just blame it on the pollution from coal-fired power plants. But the chemical signature does match as a base material coal fly ash with other constituents added to that. So again, this toxic mix, as you correctly stated, is infiltrating everything. And most people don't know. I know you do, and many of your listeners probably do, but you can fit 100,000 nanoparticles across the width of a single human hair. It makes it bioavailable into virtually everything. And these elements are named in patents, specifically polymer fibers. And when what's being found looks like a manufactured particle, yes, we have plastic decomposition around the globe, no question. But when it's showing up virtually everywhere, from the North Pole to the South Pole, top of Mount Everest, and the particles seem to match, this is not a simple case of decomposition. And in the case of the aluminum, what we hear from people at geoengineeringwatch.org, Dr. Anna, is some have done very minimal research and they've learned that much of the Earth's strata is aluminum. So they conclude we should expect to see it everywhere. And that's obviously, as you know, not true. Aluminum doesn't exist in free form in the environment, period. It has to be mined and refined and dispersed in order to be there in free form. And what we're seeing also, Dr. Anna, is a systematic cover-up of, in the case of aluminum, of agencies covering this up. We know the water quality testing in most municipalities in 2002 in the US stopped testing for aluminum. Why would they stop testing for aluminum? I've been invited into closed-door meetings in Northern California, Redding Environmental Waste, shown the test of massive spikes of aluminum flowing down the Sacramento River, the drinking water for much of the state, after every single rain event. And they have never released those tests to this day. Never. Everybody's protecting their paychecks and pensions while we're all being irreparably contaminated and damaged.
Wow. So do you think that this is also a cover up from this military industrial complex? Because, for example, I'm a board member at the National American Renaissance Movement. We sent a letter to the EPA in New Jersey and asked about the chemtrails and asked a lot of pointed questions. And we got the standard answers. Oh, these are just contrails and it's a conspiracy theory that we think that there's a problem. So we are in 2025 with everything that is known, and still these lies are happening. So, people are always saying, well, Dr. Anna, why don't you go sue someone? And I'm like, well, who? What is the next step in terms of this, and who's responsible that we the people can hold them accountable for poisoning ourselves and our children and potentially exterminating the next generations?
Let me back into a few of those questions. First, all these operations are completely compartmentalized. So the vast majority of those participating have no idea what they're participating in. If they have some idea, they're told this is something benevolent, something for the common good, something that must be done. Just like the US soldiers in Vietnam that were spraying Agent Orange, not just on innocent civilians, but their own comrades on the ground. They certainly weren't told this will kill your comrade eventually. The depleted uranium ammunition used in the Middle East that's contaminated those regions virtually forever with a radioactive half-life of 4.5 billion years. That's US ammunition, depleted uranium. So we have no regard for the consequences, certainly not to the population. Dr. Anna, you've seen the films of the detonations of the nuclear bombs in the Nevada test sites from the 40s, and the soldiers jump out of the trench and are told to run toward the blast center. They all died an early death. In fact, from those detonations, we now know from peer-reviewed study that no less than 500,000 Americans died as a direct result of the downstream fallout. How many Americans know that? So again, with these programs, you have what amounts to a headless, heartless, soulless cancer of control, all the individual cancer cells doing their part, whether they work for Raytheon or Lockheed Martin, or even the National Weather Service and NOAA, our nation's weathermen. Both agencies have an illegal federal gag order on all agency operations. It's not specifically for geoengineering, because that would be a massive red flag, wouldn't it? It's all agency operations. I've had a NOAA scientist state to my face, quote, "We all know this is going on. We have no First Amendment protection. We don't know what to do." So back to the suing anybody, as you mentioned, because many people clamor for that. And you are completely correct. It is not an easy task, because the entire system has been designed, one, not to show these contaminants, and two, to have no actionable liability for the contaminants when they show up. Entire systems have been designed that way. So one, they don't look for any of these major constituents in any air quality testing. And I know that from closed door meetings in Sacramento with top EPA officials, told to my face, the entire system is rigged. We're told to test for combustion particulates only. Everything else goes out the window. Next, they're testing for PM10, generally 10 microns, occasionally PM2.5, but nothing even remotely in the realm of nanoparticle testing. So that entire massive amount of material goes completely off the radar by design. So when you do sue, and Geoengineering Watch is the only organization that I know has litigated. We litigated against Dr. Douglas McMartin, who represents Caltech, Carnegie, MIT, and Cornell. He is one of the primary geoengineering disinformation scientists whose job is to convince the public it isn't happening. We sued him, and the system sided with him, as we expected they would. But nevertheless, we drug him into a litigation scenario that certainly he didn't like. The other disinformation scientists know that we were driven enough to litigate in spite of the fact we knew the system would side against him, but it gained publicity. It was covered in actually Bloomberg News. So we did put a shot across their bow with that. But the bottom line is, the only way that we will stop these programs is from the inside out. And that comes right back to that critical mass of awareness, when everybody who's a part of it, either actively or passively, and their families know what they're participating in, and they stand down because they're literally participating in their own near-term self-extermination. That is the only way we have of stopping this. And if we could fully expose it, Dr. Anna, and I'll leave it with this, we would cause an absolute shockwave around the world as populations realize what their governments have done to them without their knowledge and consent. And then they would start to consider the CV-19 scenario, that's in the same category. And it would drag so much to the surface with it. And that's our goal.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree with that. The other aspect of it is, the detriment to the species of this earth. I saw some just record decline in, extinction level events of species by, 4,000 or some insane, unfathomable number. And nobody can tell me that these microplastics that they're saying that occur because, the environment is polluted, but exactly like you're saying, well, on the North Pole and the South Pole, they're finding the same chemicals, which actually are matching also what we find in the blood. And so, this is affecting our wildlife and our ecosystem. And I'm not a biologist, but it is not a far-fetched logic. It's like, when is the entire system going to collapse when you're eradicating so many species and affecting plant life and the food supply? What do you see in regards to just the global stabilization with all of this stuff being now the dimming of the sun, everything that is changing, and how rapid this is progressing?
You're completely correct on all fronts, on every concern you just cited, completely on target. We're facing an already unfolding collapse of the web of life. So these ubiquitous materials are, as you stated, infiltrating every form of life. So let's start from the base of the food chain, from plankton to insects, all of which are imploding right now. It's not somewhere off on the horizon, it's happening right now. In the case of plankton, we have recent peer-reviewed study in the Atlantic that, of course, there are many sources that try to then debunk. And we know that these sources don't need to necessarily have any factual information. They just simply need to say it isn't so, and the public wants to hear that it isn't so, and that's the end of it. Plankton populations in the Atlantic down 90% right now. Plankton is the largest oxygen producer on the planet. Global atmospheric oxygen content is plummeting. We have insect populations down 80 to 90% right now, terrestrial and aquatic. We first published that at geoengineeringwatch.org in 2012, and we had many so-called science institutions try to marginalize that work. And our work was with former government scientists to come up with those figures. Now we have acknowledgement from the science community because they can no longer hide this. So my question would be, how long does anyone think that we can survive on this planet if the insects can't survive? And to back up to I want to back up on something you said earlier about the quote condensation trail narrative, and they jump to conspiracy theory. That is the most moronic narrative at this point imaginable, because we have film footage of these jets at altitude, nozzles visible, turning dispersions on and off. End of discussion. This is not condensation, period. Has anybody ever seen an Arctic researcher whose breath condenses? Do they have a cloud hovering over their head after a few minutes of conversation? Of course not, because condensation doesn't do that. And when we have the same elements named in climate engineering patents showing up in our rain test, and as you know, I think you've maybe seen the dimming, Dr. Anna.
Yes.
We took a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration flying lab with top scientists in it to altitude, sampled what heavy aircraft were emitting, processed that at Rensselaer Polytechnic University in New York, world-renowned institution, found exactly what we knew we'd find, starting with aluminum nanoparticles. So aluminum being, and I know all your listeners probably know this because they watch you, and you are certainly versed in all of this, but aluminum being toxic to all life, period, no exceptions. So of course it's destroying the web of life. And if we look at this statistically, you mentioned species extinctions. The current statistics today indicate, and by the way, we have no idea how many species there are on the planet. It's felt that as few as 10% or less may have even been identified yet. So we're losing species we don't even know exist. And there may be as many as 100 million of them. So we're losing 200 to 300 species of plant, animal, and insect statistically a day right now. That's 15,000 times the background rate, because you hear people say, oh, well, species have always come and gone, right? Not at 15,000 times the background rate. That's 1.5% of normal. There's nothing normal about that. So again, on the current trajectory, we will not be here much longer. And I can't stress that with enough gravity. We are on a trajectory for near-term global omnicide. And if we add the ozone layer disintegration on top of this, which geoengineering is destroying, it's not hairspray cans, which release bad CFCs, of course, but that's like a Dixie cup, a paper cup full of water compared to a tidal wave when you have a military tanker dumping 100 tons of material at once. So we face functional ozone layer collapse in the next few years. We're already down to 30% remaining based on our readings. So, I mean, from every angle, the walls are closing in. So your sense of urgency is completely on target.
I heard you one time say that we're inhaling about a credit card size of particles, as a human being. It's something completely unfathomable. Can you kind of explain a little bit, what is the magnitude of this? Because I can show people the blood tests. I can show people, we do live blood analysis. I don't see anybody unvaccinated at this point who's not fully contaminated blood, and I can draw 30 cc's of blood and let it sit for 4 hours, and it will turn into a polymer layer, into rubber. Blood is not supposed to turn into rubber. And so can you just kind of explain a little bit? You've extrapolated on just the amounts of stuff that we're talking here.
Those weren't our studies, but they are science studies, and we cited them at geoengineeringwatch.org. And I believe the study's conclusion was that we are, depending on location and conditions, inhaling what amounts to a credit card of plastic. I believe it was a month. So again, depending on location and conditions. But to add credence to this, I would encourage your listeners to, on one of these hazy days when the aircraft are certainly dispersing and it's down to ground level and you can see the visibility is being interfered with, find a dark location, brightest light they can find, away from light pollution, aim that light straight up and look up through that beam. And you have to see it to believe it. It looks like you're in a snowstorm. There is so much particulate matter coming down that you cannot see during the daytime. It's beyond shocking to see this. And to give another example of how much particulate matter is coming down, in the case of aluminum, which affects soil pH value. So we have normally acidic soils in my location of Northern California, and I have the historical baselines in my possession. From a contact at USDA, I have baselines from the 30s and 40s. And our soils here were 5.4, 5.5. These are normally naturally acidic soils. Now we're seeing 6.5, 6.6. They've altered 10 to 12 times. One point in that scale is a magnitude of 10. They've altered 10 to 12 times toward alkaline because there is so much metal in the rain. It's killing all the soil microbiome. It's affecting root systems, and we have peer-reviewed study to prove that. Bioavailable aluminum causes root systems to shut down nutrient uptake. So when we see forests dying all over the globe, and they absolutely are, and we have official agencies blaming it all on the beetles. The beetles are only a symptom of a sick and dying organism, and none of this other contamination is being acknowledged. But back to the quantity of material coming down in the rain, it takes an inconceivable amount of material to alter surface soil pH values to that magnitude.
So, any normal human being who has a conscience and who is listening to our conversation, I mean, my heart is like hurting right now. And I cannot fathom the people who, for example, are flying these aircraft. Sometimes I watch them over my house and I'm just like, what kind of a person is this? And why isn't there an awakening? And are these all soulless people, or are they just following orders? I mean, I was even asking my subscribers, it's like, maybe we should track these airplanes and find the pilot and sue the pilot for murder. I mean, is that the next step? What am I supposed to be doing about this? To be able to do something, which, like 3 years ago or 2 years ago, I did an event with Clifford Carnicom and Alana Freeland and all of them. And we were at that point, speaking about just the urgency of it. You've been at this for decades. So, again, what do you see as a strategy forward other than us speaking and trying to educate people? Because again, action needs to be held, but what kind of an action?
Again, I would argue that when I started this journey now over 2 decades ago, I only heard my own voice coming back at me. Nobody listened to anything on this issue. And in that time, I've had military generals, former Canadian Minister of Defense, diplomats from other countries. I've had so many now join this battle because they know they're fighting for their own lives. And until we reach that point, all other strategies can't reach fruition. We need these wheels to turn the fight on their own. And I would compare this to the colonial war, Dr. Anna, when we don't need to line up like the British in rows in that kind of organized fashion. We need to fight like the colonists from behind rocks and trees, which means every single individual can start a spot fire of awareness in their own circle and ask those around them to do the same, to start and stoke that fire of awareness. And you do that by sharing credible data. And I can't stress that enough. Geoengineeringwatch.org makes every effort to stand on credible, verifiable data, not speculation, hypothesis, and conjecture. And that's how you credibly move this fight forward. And we supply at less than our costs. We supply our printed materials on our homepage just to provide activists what they need to help move this fight forward, because passing on credible data, images, satellite shots, a copy of the federal gag order on National Weather Service and no employees, that's a lot more powerful than ranting at someone. So again, we try to make those tools available, but if everybody did this, I go back to the exponential equation. One person credibly tells 2 on the first day of the 30-day month, and those 2 each on the second day. At the end of 30 days, you're into the millions. And people don't realize that exponential equation. If we each just did our part, if we could force this issue to the light of day, the fur would absolutely fly when every single weather catastrophe now carries liability for all those that are damaged. And we're about to possibly see that this week with the hurricane that is scheduled in the Gulf. It's impossible to know what the end result will be because they can make or break that storm any time they want. The U.S. hurricane suppression and manipulation operations started in 1947 with Project Cirrus, and they have come an unimaginably long way since. And we know they are steering these storms because we've recorded the frequency transmissions that are steering the storms. Encourage your listeners to search geoengineeringwatch.org hurricanes, and they'll find a number of our links with these recordings that are shocking. You don't need to know anything about meteorology. You will see the interaction of the transmissions with the storms. They have a repelling effect on the air masses that are seeded with electrically conductive particles. So again, back to your question of how we stop this. If we really force this to light and people knew that there is no natural weather at this point because the entire system has been affected and disrupted, we have countries actively or passively cooperating all over the globe. We have a UN conference this week, by the way. Dr. Anna, you probably knew that, right? And so we already see data coming from that conference that countries are increasingly distrustful of each other. And this is relating to the climate scenario. And we believe it's likely that this former cooperation between otherwise adversarial nations, we have a U.S. Senate document 800 pages long to confirm that. It's at geoengineeringwatch.org, that even otherwise adversarial nations will cooperate on climate intervention operations because you can't just geoengineer over your own country. China, Russia, U.S., no matter what conflict we see at the surface, they have absolutely been colluding and cooperating. We know Soviet weather modification scientists came to the U.S. at the height of the Cold War to gather our data on the issue, and ours went there. That's not indicative of an adversarial relationship, at least not on this level. So that cooperation seems to be breaking down. We see the type of weather catastrophe we just saw in Dubai, for example, within days of the window where they decided to ditch the dollar. Suddenly their country's flooded with 2 years worth of rain in 6 hours. Is there a connection? And we see this in many, many cases. That's only one example. And so is weather warfare now between formerly colluding and cooperating nations, is that now unfolding just like mafia families that work together to a point, and when there's not enough to go around or the walls start to crash, they begin to infight? Is that what we're seeing now?
Wow, that's a very, very important questions. I'm wondering about, HARP came up in the research project with Clifford Carnicum because we checked the blood for its sensitivity to electromagnetic frequency from 0 to 25,000 hertz. And it turned out that the vaccinated blood had extreme sensitivity at 4 hertz, which the unvaccinated blood sample didn't have. And I have filmed self-assembling nanotechnology, very similar to also what's been sprayed in regards to polymers and metals from the air. So what is interesting is the biological effect also of these electromagnetic frequencies that are being pulsed for weather warfare, but also I believe like Dr. Nick Begich discusses for mind control purposes, because we're bioelectric beings and we're affected by all of this warfare. Can you speak a little bit about, are these HARP satellites still online? And we sometimes see these radar maps where there's tremendous activity, sometimes 12 hours on end, and here then are either earthquakes or weather events, or and I believe also disease and inability to think straight.
Well, many good points you just tabled there. First, in regard to any type of electronically stimulated biotech, why would it not exist? Why would we think they wouldn't develop something exactly in that category? And the exposure to the frequencies alone is harmful, period. There's no rational denial of that fact. So when we consider all of that on top of what we know we're breathing, inhaling with every breath we take, at the point in time, and this is the part that needs to be very deeply considered by all of us, that it's not that we're going to wake up overnight and the planet completely stop supporting life, although that's happening at blinding speed. When the power structure can no longer hide the gravity and immediacy of what's unfolding and what they have done to populations around the globe, they will play much, much bigger cards. And that could happen overnight. And in addition to any potentially electronically stimulated biotech that we may have already been seeded with simply from the air we breathe, even those that are unvaxxed. What is to stop those in power, since we already have polymer fibers and graphene in the precipitation? We know both those materials are used militarily as biological carrier platforms to carry a biological from the clouds to the ground for biological warfare purposes. And we know we have the world's second most recognized geoengineer, Dr. Ken Caldera. We own the audio of him stating this in his own words, that what he did for the US DoD was to design methods of spraying pathogens into clouds to infect the populations below. We know with CV-19, there was something like 85 countries infected in 3 days. That's indicative of an airborne dispersion. So my point is, circling back, when those in power know that the public is about to wake up and panic and they're about to lose control, what's to stop them from putting something far more lethal into this mix? Ebola, Marburg, and they can level the playing field overnight. And so our point with dealing with this issue, we have to prioritize this issue. We absolutely cannot hide from what they're dispersing 24/7, which we already know is highly toxic, synergistically toxic, and they can make it much more lethal at any point of their choosing. And Anna, Dr. Anna, you know how much it takes to cover the entire horizon with an aerosol cloud. We're talking about unfathomable amount of materials. Again, a military tanker like a KC-135 can carry 100 tons in a single payload, and we're all breathing it. So again, this is absolutely a fight for life. And when I say we're on a short time horizon on the current course, I'm not talking about centuries or decades. I personally would be surprised if we make it much further at all. I'm always hesitant to list any specific date, but in the coming weeks and months, anything could happen at any point in time while people are distracted with completely scripted election theater idiocy. And I don't care what side of the fence people are on, the whole affair is scripted nonsense. We had better pay attention to the oncoming train because it's about to run us over.
I absolutely agree with that. And I've been talking about this as well because I do think that there's so many distractions. And, the blood doesn't lie. And when the amount of stuff that I am seeing inside of the blood, and I've looked at children's blood, and it looks horrifying. I mean, I think that people really need to pay attention. I haven't seen a single human being who has clean blood, and the potential health effects of this are substantial. I've seen, dementia-like symptoms in 20 and 30-year-olds. That is not normal, and it's literally a sign and symptoms of this poisoning. And so I think that what are other aspects of this war? I believe that this is a militarized war, exactly like what you're saying, that we're in the middle of weather warfare and people are not understanding it because there's a nuclear bomb going off. But in a way there is. It is, you can't really see it unless you shine a light, at night up, or you're looking at your own blood. But this is a form of warfare that is ongoing, but it's silent, and people are being told that it is not really happening. And so I just tell us a little bit more about what you're thinking that could be done, and what other aspects of, for example, the military. I mean, can we just go talk to them and say, hey, should you boycott your own military? Because what I heard this general that spoke with you say is these people are all under orders, and that if they actually break their vow of silence and they become a whistleblower, they can be court-martialed and imprisoned. So the likelihood that anybody, will move forward en masse, which is what we need. We need all of these airplane pilots to say, hey, I am not flying this anymore, and I'm not turning the switch on the poison. How would that work? And do you think that we would have any support from people, for example, like RFK, who I know talked with you and who's aware of this, and you have been giving interviews with Children's Health Defense? I mean, there's something moving with the people that are now coming into the political theater.
It's
Do you think there's
starting.
hope?
Well, there's certainly always hope. I would argue that for any of us, if we have focused our life's energy on being a part of the cure and not the disease, then that's a story that ends well, period. That's a life well lived, period. Your blood work is profoundly important. And it's certainly a harbinger of how dysfunctional our society is and how morally bankrupt when there's not legions of experts rallying around you and your work. If our blood is tainted, how long do we think we're going to continue functioning in any reasonable capacity? Why aren't there more academicians rallying around you? Because they're simply a part of the matrix, a part of the system. And I would argue for those that carry out these operations, those that fly the planes and supply the materials, this is a global Milgram experiment. And for your listeners that don't know what the Milgram experiments were, they should look them up and read about them, because it's a very disturbing testimony to human nature. And the conclusion of those experiments were that the vast majority in this particular case were willing to administer what they believed was a lethal shock to an innocent human being because they were being told by someone in authority to do so. That should be shocking. No functional, rational, moral human being should participate, and yet the vast majority of human beings did and were willing to administer that shock. And that it's a global Milgram experiment, and that needs to change. Human consciousness needs to change. We're here for a reason. It's not to pursue personal pleasures and take Caribbean cruises. It's to stand in the gap. If we care about our children, and I'm absolutely disturbed to the marrow about all those, Dr. Anna, who claim to care about their children, yet look the other way at the injections that are being forced upon them and what we breathe from our skies, and they just go about their lives like nothing's wrong. That's not a caring parent. Sorry who that rubs the wrong way. That is not a caring parent. Caring means taking action, and silence is betrayal to our children, to the web of life. And on the current course, we will likely take the entire web of life down with us, statistically, if we remain in this course. You brought up earlier what happens when these programs are stopped. And based on the data we have, it's called double catastrophe scenario. It means the blowback will be horrific. There's so much energy built up in the planet right now. It's statistically heating at the thermal energy equivalent. Try to comprehend this. And I challenge your listeners to please investigate every word I say. It's all available online, all the math, all the statistics. We're heating at the thermal energy equivalent of 13 Hiroshima nuclear bombs per second. Most of that heat has gone to the oceans. Climate engineering, in the attempt to mask that and to use weather as a weapon, is further fueling that process, because these particles, although they can block, and that's a stated purpose so your listeners know, solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol injection, cloud albedo enhancement, those are the science terms which we should use if we're speaking to media and governmental officials to not be marginalized. Stated purpose is to slow down the runaway warming of the planet, when in fact, like a pharmaceutical, quote, treatment for the human body, it simply makes the entire organism worse, not better. It's trapping more heat than it deflects, destroying the ozone layer, completely disrupting the hydrological cycle. The entirety of the Amazon forest is burning right now to the ground. How many people know that? 45,000 fires in the Amazon this year alone. It's burning to the ground. The Great Barrier Reef, which I've been on 2 expeditions there, it's done. One of the 7 wonders of the world, it's done. And so people are going about their lives as if their lives are going to keep going in the way they have, and that's simply not reality. They're feeding normalcy bias right now to keep the population asleep at the wheel until the moment of impact. So again, back to what we can do. We take a day at a time, and we focus on those in our immediate circle, wake them up, and start that ripple moving outward. Ask them to do the same. Help force this issue to the light of day so that the proverbial pitchforks and torches moment comes, so people realize that, again, this is a fight for life. And when their so-called elected official gives them a standard print form that says this is all just a conspiracy theory, that's not going to work. Whether people need to camp in front of their offices with as many as they can gather, whatever it takes to make these people actually start telling the truth, because the whole system is bought and paid for, as you stated. And with Robert Kennedy, I'm grateful that he addressed this issue. It's my understanding that 2 days ago he mentioned it again. I hope he continues to. We don't have much time. We need voices like Robert's. We need other voices, and we're working behind the scenes at geoengineeringwatch.org in many arenas to try to bring voices that will be heard around the globe to the stage. And in academia, I would recommend this. Same with the CV-19 scenario. Band together, stand up as one, so you cannot be knocked down. But we don't have much time. Every single day counts at this point.
Can I ask you to explain, the climate change agenda and narrative is saying that there's global warming, and this is why, people like Bill Gates, they want to dim the sun. Can you just really explain that it's the geoengineering program that is also really creating the catastrophic uh, um, sort of weather aspects that we are seeing, and that is part of weather warfare? And how can people really differentiate these narratives, because they're being bombarded with these lies?
It's a really important question that you bring up. And what I would really strongly recommend to everyone is to adopt this position, that how can we have any legitimate discussion about climate anything without addressing this issue first and foremost? Because what we have, unfortunately, right now, and the power structure has been very successful with this, they have much or most of alt media claiming there's nothing wrong with the planet, nothing, that we can keep doing what we've been doing forever and we'll all live long, happy lives. And that's not how the story will end. We've been horrible stewards of this planet in too many ways to even begin to quantify. The planet doesn't know the difference between a geoengineering jet aircraft dispersed particle or a particle from a smokestack or an exhaust pipe. It doesn't know the difference. It's all a part of the problem. But what we have is a very successful wedge driven into society where they have trained, taught, and programmed the environmental demographic that when they hear the word geoengineering, that they are trained that is coming from someone who completely denies all other sources of damage to the planet. So they don't want to hear another word that person says. And we stress at geoengineeringwatch.org, yes, we fully acknowledge we have damaged the planet in too many ways to even begin to quantify. But how can we leave this massive part of the puzzle that's the worst of all? How can we leave that out of the equation? And you can't rationally. So we need both sides to adopt an understanding, Dr. Anna, that let's argue about the state of the climate after we stop this. And certainly it's important to recognize we've been bad stewards of the planet. And anybody who doesn't recognize that is asleep at the wheel. I mean, we're going through 100 million. It's hard to conceive of this. We're going through 100 million barrels of liquid carbon fuel a day, 26 million tons of coal a day. We're cutting down forests all over the globe. We're dumping our waste into the oceans. In fact, I think 18 dump sites have been found off the U.S. West Coast, only one of which off the coast of L.A. contained 500,000 barrels of DDT. 500,000 barrels. They dumped it right off the U.S. coast. And there's 18 more sites. And what else don't we know about? And so it's important not to deny, again, that we have absolutely trashed this planet. But again, this ubiquitous climate intervention, climate disruption, aka weather and biological warfare, this is the single greatest assault of all. And whenever this argument is tried to be tabled, and it's always the conflict that completely eclipses the subject of geoengineering, and that's what we don't want. We should all agree there's no legitimate discussion about climate anything from any perspective without addressing this first. And that needs to happen, because it doesn't happen on both sides of the fence. We have one side addressing only the other sources of damage and the other side addressing only climate engineering. There needs to be a bridge built.
Wow. Yes, absolutely. And hopefully that doctors and healthcare providers are also understanding that the health of their patients, which is all of humanity, is affected by this problem, and hence paying attention to this issue is of immediate health impact to every human being alive on Earth right now. So you cannot say that this is a topic that is maybe too far away. No, it is right here. It is your own health, your children's health that is affected. And so I just want to thank you so much. This has been sobering and eye-opening listening, even to me, who I think that I'm pretty informed. And I just want to thank you for, I mean, all of your years of struggle and desire to really help humanity. And you've been such a light to the world. And my hope too is that the more we speak up and the more we awaken people, that we are able to turn the wheel. I don't want people to be hopeless, but you must act now. You must wake up now. You cannot postpone it. And that is absolute. Is there anything else that you want? I mean, I highly recommend your site. I share your stuff. The dimming, please share this fantastic documentary. What other aspects of geoengineering.org can people look at? So your website and all of the information there.
We try to provide that as a tool. You so correctly stated that on this wheel we need to roll, and we are all spokes in that wheel. You and I, your listeners, all of us necessary to make it roll forward. All of us needed in this battle. And if we can, again, if we can force this issue to the full light of day, we would cause a shockwave around the world, and it would alter the equation in the right direction. And no matter how late we are in the game, if we can do that, that's absolutely worth fighting for. So again, I'm extraordinarily grateful for you, your voice. And I have one question for you, Dr.
Yes.
Anna, and this, doesn't it perplex you that obviously in your field, the very notion of vaccinations that contain aluminum and mercury and now mRNA, it must do harm. It can't not do harm. Doesn't it perplex you that nearly the whole of the quote experts in your field continue to deny that blatantly obvious fact?
Yes, and I see many similarities between your field and my field, actually, and many similarities between you and I, because literally I am also marginalized in the medical field with things that are so obvious. But I think that either there is a brain block, but there's also the consequences to speaking the truth are never favorable to the one who's doing it. But ultimately, if we are soulful human beings that have a conscience, we must listen to that voice, and we must even stand up against our peers and against the system, which unfortunately, I believe that most of the doctors and healthcare providers are unaware that they are part of a depopulation military-industrial complex machine, and that medicine has always been used like that. I actually believe that the CDC, the NIH, they're part of the weather warfare and the biological warfare aspect of this, and that it's all interconnected. This is what I've been trying to tell people. It's like, look, this is all one large conglomerate of warfare. These are the same chemicals, the same aspects, but I do believe that it takes a tremendous amount of education. And as you have had to educate yourself, way beyond your field, so have I. I mean, I had to study nanotechnology and electronics and microelectronics and quantum physics, and how does that interface with biology, so the curiosity to step out of your own box and educate yourself. I mean, we must become students again, because we don't know everything. We've been lied to about everything. Everything has been a lie. And so I believe that, and I plead to, those colleagues of mine who've been watching my work and are still silent after 3 years. And I give you the answers and I show you all this stuff. And at some point we must take action. It's exactly like what you said, because we must start living the truth. And when there's enough of us, they can't do anything to us. I would rather die than live as a slave. And anyways, I just went on a rant there. Sorry about that.
That's a very important rant. Everything you said, extremely important, and we are on completely the same page, Dr. Anna, completely the same page. And I so respect and regard you for the courage you have shown in not hiding in the shadows, hiding in your cabin on the Titanic as it sinks. And everyone needs to come out of their cabins, get on the deck, and help keep this ship afloat. And you've been a stellar example to so many, and I deeply regard you, and I look forward to more exchanges with you, Dr. Anna.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dr. Anna Maria Michalczak. I am an internal medicine physician with a PhD in pathology and 20 years of clinical experience. I've written a book that's called Light Medicine, A New Paradigm, The Science of Light, Spirit, and Longevity. I have explained to the world a new model of medicine in which we understand that we are biophotonic beings of light, and that if we address this model in our approach to health, that we can significantly help people. I am also the founder of the company True Blue Medical that creates beautiful blue light wellness wraps that are utilizing this principle. What's been shown is that blue light in itself has significant healing properties. For example, it increases the production of nitric oxide in the skin, which will increase the blood flow to certain areas. It's been studied that nitric oxide can stimulate the endorphin receptors, so this can also help with pain relief in a very natural form. And you have to understand that blue light has been used in optogenetics to control all aspects of the cell cycle. So we can restore, in a way, health that the regular scientific model hasn't quite thought about. So unlike infrared lights, blue light does not generate heat. And our skin absorbs biophotons and can store these as energy for healing purposes. What we have found with our beautiful wraps is that our customers have wonderful improvements in their well-being.
I slipped on the wet hose, rolled over my ankle, and broke it. But in my mind, it was a sprain. And so I went in and I wrapped my ankle. I walked on a broken ankle for 9 days, and I think the only reason I could do that is that wrap kept the swelling down and accelerated healing in a way nothing else I've tried has done.
I had a very painful hernia problem about a month ago. Dr. Anna recommended trying the True Blue Light Wrap. I wore it for 3 days and nights, 24/7, and the pain dwindled away completely. Since then, I've used the Blue Light Wrap on my back for back pain, and I've used it for headaches and migraines.
I damaged my knee, but I had a definite noticeable improvement immediately using the True Blue Wrap. It helped directly with the pain, the swelling, and it also improved range of motion starting the first night. I know that healing this type of an injury can take months to happen, even with medical intervention, but with the True Blue Medical Wrap, I saw daily improvement.
At 71 years old, my life is full of adventures. Sometimes accidents happen during those adventures, and now I seem to have made myself arthritic. I got my blue light wrap pretty fast, and I wear it most of the time. It works. I love those little blue lights.
Thank you for watching this episode of Truth, Science, and Spirit with Dr. Anna Michalczak. If you would like to learn more about my research, you can find it on my Substack, and that is Anna Michalczak, MD, PhD, .substack.com. If you would like to find out more about my book that has won 3 different awards in the category of alternative medicine, called Light Medicine, A New Paradigm, The Science of Light, Spirit, and Longevity. You can find that at arthemasophiapublishing.com. If you're interested in the True Blue Medical Blue Light Wellness Wraps, of which I am the founder, you can find this at truebluemedical.com. Also, if you are interested in becoming a patient or in the Goliath laser, you can contact AM Medical LLC, my clinic, and the website is ammedicalmd.com. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time.